Hello and welcome back to video number 4 on keyboard basics. We started with sight reading. Hopefully you're practicing your sight reading. Covered the universal percussion skills. We had hopefully a helpful breakdown on scales and arpeggios. You have to know all of your scales and arpeggios so you can learn to play any music that comes your way. Now we're going to talk about organizing those scales in a way that is helpful and in a way that you'll actually find them in most printed music. We have 2 ways that we can play our scales. The first way, and I think it's probably the most common, is to play them chromatically. So when you talk about a chromatic scale, that is generally moving a scale by a half step from C to C sharp to D. And so first I will play my C major scale. Now, if I'm going to play these in a chromatic order, the next one is C sharp. So if you have a keyboard with you at home, do this with me. So we just played C. Now we're going to move up a half step and rebuild that scale, starting on C sharp, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. I said in the last video about knowing the notes. There are 3 things. I need to know the notes. C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B sharp, C sharp, right? So I know those notes. I know the pattern of those notes. I know what it looks like on the keyboard, and I know how to play those. I think those are very important to know all 3. So first I played C major, C sharp. The next one after C sharp, hopefully you can figure out, is D, followed by E flat, E, F, F sharp, G, A flat, A, B flat, B, and finally C. So that's generally, I think, how most people learn their scales. They just work their way up by half steps, C, C sharp, D, E flat. I actually don't think that's the easiest way to do it, but that just seems to be a natural order. Now, you'll notice as I was doing that, or if you were doing this with me at home, each scale has a vastly different shape in it. So for instance, the C major scale is a nice straight line up the naturals. The C sharp is all of the accidentals and 2 notes of the naturals. And then D is naturals with 2 accidentals. E flat is half and half, and it's kind of confusing when you do it that way. It is one of the ways you should do it, but I'm going to suggest another way that we can put our scales together. And that is using the circle of fifths. Now you should have this in your keyboard handout that we've sent you. And maybe you've seen this before, and looking at it maybe for the very first time, it might look very confusing. I think after we break this down, this is going to really help you memorize and remember all of your scales. So you'll have this with you at home. We're going to reference this. I actually think a really great thing to do is don't just read the one we've sent you. Get a piece of paper and a pencil and draw your own. By rewriting it and recreating it and going around and writing C, G, D, A, E, you'll remember it even better if you write your own. Now the idea behind this circle of fifths is we can learn our scales in the order that accidentals, sharps and flats, are added to the key signatures. So you notice we start at the very top, 12 o'clock if that were a clock, and we have C major, no sharps and flats. You can see right underneath that we have a treble clef, 5 lines, there's our staff, no sharps or flats. Okay? Now, remember, we've already done the scales chromatically and going to C sharp. But C sharp is not the next scale to learn after C. The next scale to learn is by going to the right, going clockwise on your circle of fifths, and that's going to G major, where we add 1 sharp, and that's F sharp. And you'll notice that they call this the circle of fifths because between C and G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is an interval of a perfect fifth. And you'll notice as you go around this to clockwise to the right that the interval is always a fifth and you always add 1 sharp. If you would go the other way on the circle, it would actually be ascending fourths. And some people call it a circle of fourths. So just to break that down a little bit, classical musicians tend to think of the circle of fifths, and some jazz musicians tend to think about a circle of fourths. Both are super helpful. I think you should be able to understand going both ways. We'll focus just right now on going to the right around the circle of fifths. So we've played our C major scale. No sharps or flats. Now let's go to the right, one scale, and we go to G major, and instead of playing an F natural, replace the F natural with an F sharp. All the notes are the same as the C major scale, except we start on G and we do not play the F natural. So by going from C to G, C major to G major, I only had to learn 1 new note. Now let's go back to when we were doing scales from a chromatic standpoint, where we played C with no sharps and flats, and then we went to C sharp, which has like 5, 6, 7 sharps. And I don't want to have to think about 7 new notes. If I go from C major to G major, I only think about 1 new note. I think it's a very easy way to do that. So let's start from the top. We have C major. Let's go to the right to G major. Change 1 note, the F sharp. Let's go to the right again and change 1 note. The C becomes a C sharp, and we start on D. So you see, I'm really only learning 1 new note when I go to the next scale on the right. And you can go all the way around this circle of fifths, and what you'll notice is that it actually ends up where it started. So C, G, D, A, E, and then we have to go to B, F sharp, follow around, C sharp, A flat. We changed the flats there. It's a little easier to think about 4 accidentals than 7 accidentals. A flat, E flat, B flat, F, and we get back to C. So we complete the circle. By doing that circle, we play all 12 major scales. Now, we could have played all 12 major scales chromatically, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I would have learned them all, but I think in a very archaic order, as opposed to only adding 1 note, changing 1 note as we go around the circle of fifths. So I think that's the easiest way to learn these. So you're going to want to work around this circle of fifths very slowly. Again, you know, I'm saying we're adding 1 note, but remember what I said earlier, you have to still know the notes, be able to say all the notes, know where they are, and know where to play them. So it takes some time to really digest all 12 scales. It's a lot to learn, but it's the most important rudiment when it comes to playing on the keyboard. One last thing on playing the circle of fifths. It's kind of a fun exercise. This will be just a slightly more advanced thing to do. But I actually can play all the way around the circle of fifths non-stop by altering a note between the scale. And let me show you what I'm going to do. C major. And then I'm going to walk my way up the scale. I'm going to raise the 4th in C, which was F, and change it to the new note in G, F sharp, and that helps me change the key. Listen to that again. when I changed that F to an F sharp, you could hear the tonal center. You could hear the key change to G. So now I'm on the second scale on the circle of fifths, G major. And I'm going to do the same thing again. 1, 2, 3, raise the fourth. That's my new note. And now I'm in D. I'm going to do it again. Raise the fourth. Now, unfortunately on this exercise, I run out of notes. So I'm just going to stop, come back down. I was at A, and I'm going to raise the fourth. 1, 2, 3, raise the fourth. There's my new note. I'm going to E major, win 4 sharps. Raise the fourth. Raise the fourth. I ran out of notes. 1, 2, 3, raise the fourth. Raise the fourth. I ran out of notes. Raise the fourth. Raise the fourth. There's F. And raise the fourth. And where am I? Back at the top of the circle. I just played all 12 scales non-stop, thinking about just the new note, not rethinking all 7 notes in each scale, and getting through all 12 of those scales in that order is super helpful. The most important thing you're going to do in learning rudiments on the keyboard.